Because one of the boys dropped him off and the door was locked.
Yeah.
So he's sitting out there in the sidewalk trying to call somebody to open the door.
Where's my gavel?
Oh, there it is.
Just yell.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works Finance and Safety Committee meeting of Monday, December 3rd, 2018. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion and second for approval? Moved by Bueller. Second by Y. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 2 is public input, and this is the time set aside for anyone to come forward if they would like to say something that isn't on the agenda. Seeing nobody, I will move on to item 3, which is approval of the agenda, and I need to remove item number 7, and so we'll do that. And so is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Albertson. Second by Y. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 4 is discussion on the proposed certificate of completion for development improvements for East Park Development, 8th Avenue Southeast, and a portion of 26th Street Southeast, and a resolution of acceptance for 8th Avenue. And we're following our ordinance carefully as written, and this isn't something we normally do, but so I asked Heath if he would please explain this so you can ask some questions now. And we are in the process of revising our development regulations, but until that's done, we're going to follow the written ordinance. So Heath, will you please explain what's going on here?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor. So before the City Council this evening and the regular council meeting will be 2 separate action items, one of which is to issue a certificate of completion for development improvements related to 8th Avenue Southeast and a portion of 26th Street Southeast, and then also a separate action item for the acceptance of the 8th Avenue Southeast portion of those improvements. In a nutshell, the easiest way to describe this is our current subdivision regulations have a project closeout process in place. That closeout process includes these 2 steps that I just briefly acknowledged here that are coming up on tonight's agenda. The first step being a certificate of completion. What that is it means staff has inspected the work from the developer's contractor that they performed as was permitted. And that's what the inspection does. We're making sure it was permitted or built to the permitted plans and specs, that all the work is complete and in place and ready to be accepted by the city as public infrastructure. Once that inspection is complete, there's other subsidiary things that we receive, like record drawings of any utilities that were installed, of the streets, curb and gutter, storm sewer, wastewater, sanitary sewer, things of that nature. We receive record drawings of those improvements. And then, according to the sub-regs, it's upon the city engineer to make recommendation to the council to issue the certificate of completion. The final thing that certificate of completion accomplishes is it starts the 1-year warranty date for development improvements. Every development that puts public improvements out on the ground or in the ground is required to provide the city a 1-year warranty on those improvements. Some of you are probably familiar with that, and some of you maybe aren't. But that is a formality in our current subdivision regs that is triggered by the certificate of completion. So that certificate of completion says things are done to our specs, and it's as the adopted date of that certificate of completion, that initiates the 1-year warranty period.
Make your computer easier to use. On screen.
Robots are coming.
I thought I had an assistant there I wasn't aware of.
That robot's out of order.
After that 1-year warranty period is up, the developer, again, gets in contact with city engineering office, and we make a warranty inspection. And we review all the improvements to make sure there isn't a trench settlement, make sure there's not a premature cracking in the pavement, the curb and gutter, sidewalk, things of that nature that we would want to address under the warranty. If it passes warranty inspection, it is then, again, upon the city engineer to bring forth recommendation to city council to pass a resolution of acceptance of those public infrastructure improvements for perpetual city ownership and maintenance. They become ours forever to own and maintain at that point. Now, the reason we're doing two different action items tonight, because obviously there isn't going to be a year's lapse in time tonight for a year warranty to occur. However, this is a unique project to where the 8th Avenue Southeast improvements were done quite some time ago. And so upon our inspection to say, okay, they're complete, we'll issue a certificate of completion. In talking with the mayor, staff, and I, we're very comfortable in saying we can use this point in time to start or to formally accept those because they've effectively gone through a year warranty cycle, if not closer to 2 years, for the 8th Avenue component only. So, again, to wrap all that up, we're going to have a certificate of completion for 8th Avenue and 26, and then an acceptance of just 8th Avenue because they've effectively undergone a year warranty already and have met all the inspection requirements from the engineering office.
And 26th Street was just constructed this year, so that's appropriate that it just has a certificate of completion. Then next year we'll do the acceptance. Are there any questions about this? Councilman Elberson?
Who does, I mean, there are a lot of things going on, so who ultimately goes out? I know you said is going to be the bottom line on it, but who inspects all these?
So, the regular protocol that would happen is any of the engineering staff, as directed by the city engineer, could go out on that warranty inspection. Typically, it would be the assistant city engineer. If he's not available, I could see one of our engineering specialists or engineering technicians be involved in that process. But what we do is we communicate and coordinate with the developer or their engineer and or their contractor, because we want somebody from the developer's side of the discussion present during these walkthroughs, whether it be the completion walkthrough or the warranty walkthrough. So we communicate with them, we set up and schedule this walkthrough with them, but also we've gone a step further and we're inviting the street department, the wastewater department, and municipal utilities as well. We want to make sure that the water lines installed weren't disrupted. They can still get their valve wrenches on their valves and things of that nature before we accept these improvements for city ownership and maintenance. So it's a cumulative effort of all parties that should be involved in an inspection like that, but it is spearheaded through the city engineer's office and the city engineering staff.
Councilman Vilhauer?
This is probably a separate issue, but I know there's a lot of discussion concerning payment of the work on 26th Street, and I believe we entered into a cost-sharing arrangement with a couple different parties, and we paid part of that. I mean, is that being followed up on? Has that been adhered to, or is that still in the works? Or
yes, the collection of that payment is ongoing, and according to that development agreement that was executed, I forget how long ago, the responsibilities of the development agreement fall in line with each one of those subdivided lots out there. Each one of those lots adjacent to these improvements are responsible to pay a cost share. There has been one, and that's based on the time of transaction of the sale of those lots.
You're talking about 8th Avenue, and he's talking about 26th Street. And,
Sorry.
And that, Heath, it's okay. You weren't here when we negotiated that, and that was 26th Street. I'm assuming that the city has made our reimbursement, but we haven't.
I don't think they've sent us a bill yet.
Oh, okay. Our part of it was a lump sum toward the cost, so apparently hasn't been made yet.
that is being monitored by our staff, right? Okay.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Heath.
You're welcome.
Item number 5 is discussion on an alley paving request from Mike Landsberger. And I meant to tell Heath where this is and are you able to access, you've got your drive up, and Ray, you could switch if you need to, but I see Mike's here, and I would like to invite Mike to approach the microphone. And he's, within your packet, you can see the requests that he made to the city. And we have a process for the city building streets by way of assessment. And essentially, what Mike is asking is that the city do it at taxpayer expense, the initial paving of the gravel alley, because he believes that the city did the initial paving of the other downtown alleys many, many years ago. But we don't have any evidence of that. Maybe Mike does.
That I don't. It's just that, back in the 50s and 60s, the downtown district kind of controlled Watertown. That's where all the major businesses were. I think every new car dealer was downtown. So I think that for me to imagine they would have paid for that assessment, I don't think so. The new policy that's in now, when was that passed? What year?
Oh, state law has been, we don't know. Is in anyone's current memory. It's been decades.
Okay.
By assessment.
Okay.
The assessment process for paving.
Yeah. All the business people that have something that are here are Joe Castor, Larry Andrews, Travis Cartney, and Jethro from Proline, who's representing them. Mm-hmm. But, we're all very pro on improving downtown Watertown. And there's been a lot of improvements done on the First Avenue area. And, we've watched all the other alleys being ripped up and torn, taken out, utilities put underground. And I talked with the previous administration. He promised us that it would be done, but that's, that was 2-3 years ago. But we just feel that this would be an easy one to do for the city, being there's no pavement in there. And you mentioned, Sarah, when I talked to you the last time, that the utilities said they were going to bury all the lines downtown.
No, you said you thought they were, and I said they're burying select lines.
Select.
They are not burying all lines.
Okay, all right. I was under the impression they were going to bury all
No,
lines.
I would suggest you contact them if
I've
to
started
see
talking. I've started
if that's
talking
one
to
of the
them.
areas they intend.
Yeah, I've started talking to them, and I've talked to them on it even a couple of years ago, so they were aware of it. And I know they've done some work down there. We're put under the gun a little bit where all these other businesses in the downtown C1 district did not have to accommodate to as far as assessments, having to work out the utilities. That was all done by the city. If you look at some of those pictures I put with it, it looks like the alley probably looks the same as it did in the 1920s.
And the city's policy is whatever the adjacent property owners build and dedicate to the city, we maintain. If you build a gravel alley, we'll grade it and maintain it. If you build a concrete alley, we'll take care of that. If it's asphalt, we take care of the improvements which are made by the adjacent property owners or the developer. And that's our standard procedure. And the alleys that we've replaced have all had hard surfacing.
But you just mentioned that you can't back up the facts of that. The previous facts have to match the current policy. Otherwise, it's null and void.
Different than it's been throughout.
But I tell you what, I'm familiar with the downtown area, and a lot of those folks, the biggest problem with downtown is the folks won't spend any money improving their properties, which for whatever reason they have, it's their choice, But if the facts, that the previous facts don't match the current policy, that makes the policy null and void after you've replaced all those alleys downtown and we would have happily taken some of those alleys. In fact, the one over there at County Fair, they can rip that up and transfer it over to ours. We'd take that.
No, I
compared to the
understand.
mud.
I understand, and that is actually a pretty common misconception that people have, that the city paves gravel surfaces for people, because we do often, you see us out there, we design it, we build it, but then we bill it back by assessment, and
I can understand that for residential, but not for the C1 district. I think we got backdoored on that policy. And I can understand why you do it for the residential areas, but for the C1 district, and we're the only alley in downtown that isn't paved or utilities
actually, I think
dropped.
there's another one, and I think there are numerous places where the utilities aren't underground. I did make a map, and Heath, if you could,
The only one I think that
Go
might be
to
otherwise is the alley by
project
Second Street.
2013, 1309.
I think the only one that might not be paved is the alley down through Second Street, and there's
Yes.
there's a lot of residential in
And
there.
that one came with a petition at one point, which failed, but Councilman Solom?
Didn't it, my recollection is that we were gonna have money in the budget every year, and we were gonna start in the core of downtown and work out.
Okay, and this is what I've asked Heath to bring up, is the staff was directed to enumerate all the gravel streets, not alleys. So I'll show you what we have a record of. And did you find that? That if you could put on the gravel streets map first. Okay, that's gravel alleys. These are the gravel alleys that we have in town.
But
And
that's residential.
those are alleys. That's our entire town.
Right, but
Not-
we've had a discussion on this previously for downtown in the residential, or in the commercial district within the urban renewal zone. We were starting in the center, and the utilities was on board with it. That's where they wanted to start working Bering underground, and they were gonna move out from the center of downtown out. And that's, I guess, what I was under the assumption, that we were gonna hit every alley
Can
in the
you-
downtown commercial area.
Could you, Heath, could you put up gravel streets? We have been rehabilitating the paved surface back to the same, whatever it was. If there was concrete there, we'd put concrete. If there's asphalt, generally we put asphalt. These are the gravel roads, and we had a discussion about this. I estimated like $4 million to pave the gravel roads in town. And we're currently in the process of prioritizing which ones we would do first, so that the council can decide if they want to subsidize some of these. Otherwise, the pavement of gravel surfacing is the responsibility of the property owners. But if you want to add the gravel alleys to that, we certainly can, and we'll add it into the prioritization. And now, Heath, if you'll switch to the gravel, these are where the gravel alleys are. So those were not included in the,
Yeah, but we've had a discussion separate to this than on the downtown urban renewal district. And that was part of a talk that we had, what are we doing downtown to improve things? And it was doing all the alleys, and it was burying underground utilities, and I don't know if you wanna share on that.
Mr. Solomon is correct in saying this. There is I think, I don't know if it was a resolution or something other than that, but he is correct in saying that downtown has been prioritized. There is money set aside for downtown alleys improvements. And how I was told right when I got here is it was to improve alleys that had already been improved at one point by the owners. So that most of them have been asphalt, and then now we're improving them to concrete, and that's all done within this budget that you were talking about, Councilman. And so that's kind of where we sit, and that's why this is a unique request, because it hasn't been paved before. So we try to come back and get asphalt surfacing that needs to be redone, and we prioritize them based on the level of need, I guess, on each alley. So I guess that's where we're sitting to kind of answer your question a little bit better.
Okay, so if you can, I don't know if you can zoom in real close to this to show the downtown area. There's very few, I think behind Second Street Station, it's probably the only other downtown alley that is still gravel. But there are many gravel alleys. Some of those are in commercial areas that we do assess. And behind Wheel Inn is an example of one that is, Wheel Inn is a commercial business. And
Us downtown businesses would gladly pay the same amount of money that the businesses downtown have paid you for redoing their cement work and everything else.
but those
We will
were
happily.
originally, we don't have any record that shows.
Yeah,
that-
we're being backdoored on this, showing us the whole city. We're being backdoored on this. I'm talking about just the C1 district. I have poured a ton of money into the First Avenue project, cleaning up businesses. And I've brought 5 or 6 solid businesses. They're solid. They're not just there for 6 months and go
We
broke.
appreciate that
And
very much,
And I
Mike.
can't speak for these guys. All I can do is speak for myself. But I poured a retirement into fixing that area up. And it was the worst part of downtown, and we're not given any credit for it. And then for us to have to pay for other folks' in the C1 district, that's all I'm talking about. I don't want to hear about alleys
Okay, but
on North
The
Maple.
people
and
who pay to have their alley do want the council
Well,
to hear
then
about
would
it.
charge us the same price you charged these other folks in the last 4 or 5 years
Okay, but you
in the
can't-
C1 district.
you-
Charge us that
All right,
amount,
I
which
have
is zero.
to say though, Mike, there is no record that you have evidence of showing that the city paid for
Well,
any
that
of
should
those
mute you
initially.
guys, that should mute your argument too. That should mute your argument too. If you can't back up the facts
I
with,
haven't
with
looked,
paperwork,
but-
it should mute your
I
argument
think that
too.
if you ask the city to change its ways, you should provide evidence that would support that.
All I can tell you is what I know, and people don't change that much.
Well, and I appreciate all that you've done downtown. You have really done a lot of
Well, all these
of
other
really
folks
nice
wanna
work
do
downtown,
improvements.
and it isn't gone without notice.
Yeah.
It's just that this is a different, what you're suggesting is
A backdoor
new thing,
case.
and there's a lot of other alleys that people would like to have
I don't want to
paved,
be
and-
talking residential, I want to talk just C1. That's what I want to talk to, but that's all we see, is surrounding us. I don't want to talk about
So we
residential
would,
on South
we would
Maple
differentiate
and Second
C1
Street.
property to, we have houses in C1, and I'm
Oh,
assuming.
there is a few, there is a
wouldn't-
few, especially down by the Second Street Station.
Okay, well, thank you for your input, and council?
Like I said, we'll pay the same price that everybody else paid that had their alleys paved in the last 5, 6 years. Whatever they paid, we'll pay that amount. We don't want to be schmucks about it.
Heath or Matt, do we have any ability to go back? I mean, I know we're talking about a long time as far as who did pay for, previous paving of alleys in the downtown area. Do we have any kind of records that, I mean, to Mr. Landsberger's point, that we can either substantiate the city's position or what did happen?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think, given the age of what the original pavement on some of these alleys might have been,
50s,
it might-
60s.
it might be like a needle in a haystack type of exploration to find out what those costs were and who paid those costs.
We would like to see that.
But I can speak to today's standards. Obviously, it's a pay-as-you-go development status in the city. If somebody wants to develop their land, they put in the public infrastructure, as we all know. This is unique in that it's existing gravel road infrastructure. Colin described our recent alley projects fairly clearly. Those have been prioritized based on replacement pavement only. I don't believe, to my understanding, Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, we have not paved any gravel alleys yet under that new program that we've initiated in the recent past.
We, on this First Avenue, First Street Northwest, it's on those copies I gave you. That water runs to the west. down to Second Street. That water runs into all of our property because the alleys had so much gravel put over it in the last 20 years. I spent $20,000 bringing my property, just the back there, to not have all that water flow into my parking lot. Another thing I gotta mention too is that this alley that runs north and south on that block behind the old Zimmel's Furniture, that's paved. That should be done without even an argument, at least that part, you know. That's paved there, and, you know, all I feel is that it's grossly unfair, and, you know, and I think the folks I've been talking to and dealing with agree with the same. It's an unfair policy, and we're being backdoored in on residential stuff, and we're not being treated the same one as C1s, and we pay plenty of taxes for what we have, and for us to have to pay for other folks' while we don't, while we're treated second class, and you know, if these folks want to say something, you know, like I say, it's grossly unfair, and we're being backdoored on it.
Well, I'm sorry you think that, but I don't think
It's
that's
not,
what's
don't be
going on.
sorry how I feel, it's the
It's
truth.
not backdoored. but
I think it's the
Councilman
truth.
Billhauer?
Well, why would you put up the whole city on
I've got
paved
one-
on gravel
One more follow-up
lots?
question, help me out, because I'm not an engineer of any sorts. If this alley would have been paved at some point in the past, then it'd be on our list for
Absolutely.
resurfacing. Okay, what would the cost be to do what Mr. Landsberger is doing now with the current alley and paving it versus if that would have been a previously paved alley that is now broken up that would need to be redone? Is that a huge difference?
Oh, to
The,
rip the pavement up is a lot.
Well, I guess Heath or Colin.
There would
Okay.
be a slight difference in cost on a alley repavement versus a new paving installation, although not a huge difference monetarily. We did do a rough estimate on this particular alley. It fell just shy of $60,000, but you do have to remove the existing surfacing, albeit it is gravel. You do have to remove that, put in quality base course, and then pavement. An existing paved alley, you typically mill that surface off, the asphalt, if it is asphalt, and then repave over that. So it's the removal portion that's really the general difference between those two scenarios. One, you're removing gravel surfacing and putting in base course. The other one, you're removing existing deteriorated asphalt, putting in base course, and then paving.
You know, I think if Watertown has a tourism pamphlet or something for downtown Watertown, you can tell them to come on down and look at a 1920s alley. Looks the same as it did probably back in 1920 now. And you can tell them they can have a historical site.
If the adjacent property owners are so upset with it being gravel, why aren't they interested in paying to have it paved?
They want to be treated the same as the rest of the C1.
But it
you know.
isn't like the rest of them. It isn't paved, and we
Well,
don't.
then back the facts up with paperwork saying that the original people didn't pay for theirs either, or did pay for it.
Well, we
Back
can,
the facts up
we
with.
can look and see. I
Yeah,
don't-
you gotta
as far as I
back the
know,
facts
we-
up, otherwise everything's mute to me and done. Some of these folks wanna
Right.
say something,
I
I'm
don't
not
know
gonna
if there's
change.
anything else to add. It's just, it's asking for a subsidy for something that isn't normally subsidized. But we are considering
But you
subsidy.
sure did. How many alleys did
We
you
are
guys, did you
considering
folks do
subsidizing
downtown?
some of the pavement.
How many new alleys have
That's-
you put in lately?
That's resurfacing, not initial surfacing.
Well, tell you what, the amount of money they spend graveling and stuff over the last 25, 30 years, they could have probably paid for an alley. And when they do it, half the time they mess it up. Instead of making it better, they make it worse with the plows and the gravel and stuff. It's not laid out very, professionally. It's just dumped in and spread. So,
Councilman Solon?
Do we have any way to research if any of these people in the past records paid for their alley improvements at
look.
any time?
We can look down in the vault. We've got records of all the council
Because
meetings.
if we have no record of that, and we're repaving all these alleys downtown, I don't know how we can exclude this one. And we've made a commitment, it's in the budget every year, to redo every alley downtown Watertown, and that's what we've been talking about within the urban renewal district. I don't know why this one would be any different. Yeah, it's gravel, but if it was paved, we would still tear it up and redo it. So either way, even if this alley would have been paved and we have no idea who paid for it, we would still tear it up and do it. So we're just making a big argument out of leaving one alley out of the whole project down here.
I think over the years, there's value in having paved, and people pay higher property taxes. Once, I mean, anybody that's had their alley or their streets paved has seen an increase in their property taxes as a result of it. And it is an improvement. And so I think that's a council decision. I don't think you have to make it tonight. But we have your request, we appreciate it. And I think we should, if the council directs the staff to include alleys in our prioritization database, we can do that. And if we want to break out C1 commercial, then we can do that as well. And we have all this information available. It's just extra stuff for us to do.
Requesting the original paperwork and original assessments is not any uncommon for any type of businesses and stuff. That's part of the deal. If you go to a bank or any type of a transaction, there's a lot of times you have to backtrack.
Right, but the process for paving public right-of-way, which is not paved, is outlined in state law, and we've been following that process for as long as anyone can remember. It's assessed back to the adjacent property owners, and
we did offer to pay the same price everybody else has paid over the last 5-6 years in the C1 district. We'll pay that amount.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Step microphone.
Please state your name.
Jethro Impola from Proline, but maybe I'm wrong, but I'm believing that we are paying higher taxes because with this urban development plan, and then if we're not, like if our alley ain't getting included in that, it's kind of a, why are we paying higher taxes for?
You aren't, actually, that
Okay.
was canceled. And
That was canceled,
It was
but-
canceled several years ago. And
Okay. So I was
the taxes are
misunderstanding it.
based on whatever the property is assessed, but I would assume it would be higher for one that had pavement versus gravel. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just for discussion's sake, Colin just informed me there are 12 remaining unpaved alleys in the what he would call the downtown district. Decided to add that to close out of the discussion here.
Probably
Yeah.
residential.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Vilhar?
At a minimum, I would like to see those downtown alleys included as part of our gravel streets analysis around town. Because I echo some of what John said too, that I see some issues of unfairness there. Sure, we're following our ordinance or state law, whatever it is, but by the same token, I think Mr. Landsberger makes a good point, and but I would like to see that added to our list of streets that we're analyzing in town.
Is that a motion?
Mayor.
I can certainly add that to the list. Councilman Bueller?
Glenn, I really believe that the spirit and the intent of the streets, the prioritization of the streets that we feel might need to be paved, I think it's a separate issue. I think the spirit and intent of that whole program was for streets, not for alleys. I think that's a separate issue in my opinion.
I don't necessarily argue with that, Bruce, but I think this is a valid enough issue that it does need to get consideration. As to how we do it, I don't know, but I don't feel like we can just let it lie.
I'm not suggesting we let it lie, but I don't think that should be a part of that program. I think that's a separate issue altogether. Now we want to add this to that, and all along we've kind of looked at that as an issue of streets. and prioritization of
Again, like I
paving
just said,
streets.
I don't argue with you, Bruce, but I don't want to see this issue go away and not be addressed. So however we do it, yeah.
Councilman Lallam?
I sat on the H2O20 for the alleys when that went forward. That was initially a agreement between utilities and the city to do those. Utilities are the ones that drive the boat on it. I mean, they're the ones that are burying their lines. So Mike, I would recommend that you talk to them and see if they're going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
Because that is an option, because they would bury those lines before any street work is done.
agree.
And that's what they've done, because they've been the ones that have dictated to us which alleys are gonna get done at what time, based on what they can do for their, you know, their crews that are out there and working. So check with them, and then keep us informed as to how that's done.
I've started talking
Yeah, because they're the ones that really drive the force on that, because they gotta bury all their utilities before we can even touch them. So, just an
Like I say, we're
FYI.
not demanding this to be done right away, just so we get put on the schedule.
Yeah, so check with utilities as to what their plan is, because I'm looking at the pictures that you provided, and they're blocks long, so.
And that's why the utilities wanted to start in the core.
Yeah, they had
They,
certain
they
ones
said
that
it
they
was
had
easier
started,
to start in the core with what they were doing and back out from there.
and based on where their lines went and where they could tee them off or where they had to keep going, so.
Colin?
And I just want to point out that we do follow the utilities as well. We contact them to let them know what we were thinking, and then we try to coordinate what alleys exactly. So we've already done that for next year. When this got brought up as a possible assessment, they were either going to make adjustments or try to figure out a different schedule if it were an assessment. But we do coordinate pretty heavily with the utilities on the downtown projects.
Yeah, and they typically want to continue their underground lines as far as they can. So they might bury those lines whether we're going to be paved in the alley or not. They might just bury them.
Can I say one more thing? I mentioned earlier that.
Please talk into the microphone, Mike, because
Okay. I said that with that picture up there, you see where First Avenue, First Street is, I should say, First Street Northwest. That water runs probably even part of the block to the east, and that runs down our alley. And it's like I say, it's a big mud hole, especially in the spring and probably in the fall to a certain point. When the thaw comes out in the spring and stuff. But we have no drains except at the end of the block there by the old Barclay building.
we normally would not put
And I don't
storm
think you
drains
need it
in
if we-
alleys. And I, just for the record, it's not a done deal that the drainage would be corrected by pavement.
Oh,
If it's too flat now for the water to go anywhere, challenge is going to be to make it drain even with pavement.
It runs into the lots here. That's where the water runs, into the lots. There's enough grade to drain it properly. There's enough drain. If you got on the west side there and look east, you'll see that there's a pretty good drain. I don't think, you probably got 6 inches of drain, better, maybe more.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Albertson?
Colin, do you know right offhand what the progression from the inside moving out, what's left now of what we're talking about in the downtown C area then?
Yeah.
What's left in, whether it's paved or whether it's gravel, what street, how far are we to
So
go?
what I just told Heath was 12 alleys, and the 12 alleys total is replacement and or gravel alleys that haven't been paved yet. So before I was here, there was a map of downtown alleys, and that's what we've been working off of. I don't know if it was Shane or I don't know if Sarah was involved in that map. I don't have any idea, but I was given that map. And they made a determination on what alleys were the worst, and then from that we coordinate with the utilities saying, well, we were thinking these, and they're like, well, our project's gonna go this, so then we either change or sometimes it aligns. So there are 12 total alleys that need to be done still, and I believe this was one of those 12.
Some of them are already paved, weren't they, Colin?
Most of them are asphalt.
Asphalt, right, okay. Which we have neither paved or asphalt.
Okay, well, we can dig into the records and see if we can find who initially paid for the other ones, if it makes a difference, but it sounds like for some people it doesn't matter. They see the downtown alleys as a higher priority for subsidy than regular streets throughout town. And gravel streets are not paved at taxpayer expense. They're paved at the expense of the adjacent property owners, and they're the primary access, and the alley would be secondary.
I
But
don't think it's an issue of subsidizing a priority or anything. We've already made a commitment to do downtown alleys. We've already done alleys that are paved or concrete already. All we're doing is tearing them up and redoing them. So we've made that commitment downtown to take care of these alleys. And if we're gonna do 95% of them, we might as well do all of them. Just because one alley is not, paved, doesn't mean it's a subsidy that we're gonna do it. We've done every other alley downtown. Some of them have been paved, some are fairly decent, some aren't. But we've already fixed drainage issues in them alleys, and we've paved them alleys. So it's not anything special that this alley would get that any other one wouldn't.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll do a little bit of research, see if we can dredge up some data. More information is better. Moving on is, the next item on the agenda is discussion on the proposed resolution to set aside the assessment for Lot 11, Endries Industrial Park, 3rd Edition, 26th Street Southeast Assessment Project. And I will ask Matt to explain what's going on with this one.
Thank you, Mayor. So, if you recall, a couple months ago, we finalized a special assessment for finishing a stretch of 26th Street East out near Walmart. One of the lots out there, Lot 11, is owned by Warren Development LLC. They had intended to subdivide that lot, and this is kind of a situation where the timing got a little bit off, and we went forth with the assessment. They came forth now with a plat to re-subdivide that lot, and they can't re-subdivide that lot with an assessment existing on it. State law allows us to, the way they term it is set aside an assessment. So basically what we're doing here is we're setting aside the assessment for Lot 11. Once the assessment is set aside for Lot 11, they'll come forth with their plat, it'll get filed, and then immediately after that, we'll come forth with a reassessment. And in this case, there'll be 2 lots abutting 26th Street that will get proportionally reassessed the $70,000 and $710.67. That's the gist of that. Any questions?
Councilman Villar?
Just to clarify, you said it earlier, Matt, so as a casual listener or observer, this is 26th Street on the south side of 212, not the same 26th Street that we were talking about a half hour ago.
Correct. Yep. It'd just be the, west of Walmart there? Southwest of Walmart?
Yes, southwest, and this is in Endries Industrial Park, which was, this was like the last little street section to be paved. So, yes, Councilman Lallam?
Matt, is this on 14th Avenue and 26th Street? Is that where it's at, that corner?
Correct.
That lot, that's right before it curves there?
Correct, yep.
And they're looking to split it in half,
They're actually going to
Proceed to
split
sell
it in 3.
in 3.
So there'll be, that lot will turn into 3 lots.
So essentially what we're doing is we're putting the assessment on hold, they can subdivide it, we reassess it.
Reassess it,
Not
right.
changing anything as far as time frame or anything like that.
Well, so what'll happen now is that since we missed the, we're pulling back the assessment from that lot. It won't go on their 2019 tax roll.
Goes
But
on
the-
2020.
Well, they'll come in and pay the first payment in the finance office in 2019, and then it'll be added to their 2020 tax roll for the 9 years following that.
Okay, so financially, we're still
It's
receiving everything. Okay.
Yeah, same net effect financially.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I don't think there was any action there. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Any need to go into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Lalum, second by Solemn. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We will return at 5:30.